theatre, film, TV and more. Suzy Rong reviews it all on Joy Drive.
Good afternoon, Suzy Rong.
Good afternoon, Warren. Isn't it important as queer people that we know our queer history?
It is so important. I think what's even more important is we keep finding out more about it. It's not taught in
all this
schools.
stuff that's right. All this stuff that's buried, we seem to keep finding new things to learn about. And it's important, isn't it? I feel like instinctively when this information comes up, like my curiosity about all that stuff gets to 100%. I guess you kind of feel like you need to know that you're not alone, that things that you've experienced, other people experienced before, something like that. But why do you think we feel that way?
I think also the other thing is I find, I want to know all the stuff that goes on, but I find it exhausting too. I find it exhausting at the end of it, and I just think, oh my goodness, there's a lot. We've been through so much, Suzy, and I think Fellow Travellers reveals a lot more of that. Admittedly, more US stuff, but certainly reveals a lot. What did you think of it?
I think when you said it's exhausting, I think there's a bit of truth in that. But we can get to that later.
Next week, Suzy.
No, for this week. When Tim and Hawk met in 1950, Washington, D.C. was at the height of its Lavender Scare, a period characterized by a witch hunt and relentless persecution of individuals who were believed to be homosexuals. In the 8-part series Fellow Travellers, streaming on Paramount Plus, we track the relationship of the couple over 3 decades up to the 1980s, when the AIDS epidemic all but defined the lives of gay men everywhere. Tim and Hawk's story is a tragic romance, bookended by immensely difficult periods of queer history. We watch them navigate constant threats coming at them from all directions, doing all they can to survive individually and to make sense of their lifelong attachment to each other. Fellow Travellers is a work of fiction by novelist Thomas Mullen that intricately incorporates real events and prominent personalities through the years for a representation of invisible lives that had to hide underground, of people who have been excluded from historical records due to attitudes that consider people like us to be abominable and contemptible. Tim and Hawk may not be real, but in Fellow Travellers, we are able to obtain an idea about our forefathers' lives and know that we do come from somewhere meaningful, that we should have a sense of triumph about our existences today. It is also worth noting that although the series is almost completely about 2 white men, there are commendable efforts in Fellow Travellers to include queer women and queer men of color. It is 8 hours of content after all, so there is considerable space for a little diversity in these representations of American queer history. It's an important work, so I will recommend it. But it does feel literary, which is to say that not all of it is very dramatic or TV friendly. I often found myself distracted, my mind running away somewhere else, but the show never fails to pull me back. And I don't mean only with its many instances of graphic sexual activity. The performances are excellent, the direction is sensitive, and the visuals are very beautiful. Warren, the last episode is out this Friday on Paramount Plus. Do you intend to make it to the very end?
Suzy, look, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I did love seeing the history side of things, and I guess it's an opportunity to reflect on what we've been through, particularly with respect to US history. I just found the whole series very ambitious. I feel like it's trying to pack everything that happened into the 1 8-hour series, and I found it, I found the switching between decades in each show quite confusing. It took me a while to work it out. I was thinking, hang on, why are we talking about President Eisenhower and we're also talking about someone, testing positive for HIV at the same time? I mean, they're totally different periods. I actually found it confusing, and I think one of the reasons was I was getting distracted, like you. It wasn't, the history was hooking me in, but somehow the drama or the performance wasn't hooking me in, and therefore I was losing track of where things were. It would be talking about one thing in the 1950s, and then I'd go back and it'd be in the 1980s, and I was thinking, hang on, I don't understand. How did we get there so quickly? So I found that I did struggle with that. I felt like there was a bit of a lack of cohesiveness to the series, and that was causing me to lose, not interest, but to be distracted.
Yeah, it felt like its main concern was to portray historical accuracy, and in that way I think it is very educational, and it's very important to know these things. But as a result, I thought it was dry. Like a lot of it was dry, even though like when they had sex, like every episode seems to have a really intense sex scene. It was like full on. But at the same time, but at the same
that
time,
woke us up. I stopped doing the dishes then.
That's right. It wakes you up for, wakes you up for that 40 seconds or something. And then it goes, but beyond that, it tends to be very dry. I wonder if it's because the human emotion isn't allowed to play out as much as the historical stuff, and you know that there is a lot of American political history, especially in the first 3 or 4 episodes. And later in the series, it goes to the 70s, so that's kind of like a look at the debauchery with the disco scene and the small period before AIDS, and then I think that becomes a bit more general in its interest, and people overseas, away from America, probably would be able to sink their teeth into a little bit more, but a substantial portion of the series is about American political history, and that is dry.
Definitely. And, I didn't get through. I mean, I only saw about the first 4 or 5 episodes, and I didn't get to the 80s section, I think, because we had World AIDS Day only was a couple of weeks ago, and it was quite an emotional day, and I just thought, I'm not ready to go and watch that again. So I deliberately didn't see the end of it. I may go and see the end of it. I don't know. But what I did like about it is, actually, first of all, no, one thing I didn't like about it is I feel like the historical side could do with a lot more fleshing out. I feel like I said, it's cramming it in, and it's not necessarily doing it justice. And we do need to see what happened to us, because it's no wonder we have so much trauma. And I know we talk about it a lot, Suzy. You just have to mention it, and I'm off. Yes, we definitely have it. But the lavender scare, I mean, gays and lesbians posed a threat to national security. How ridiculous is that? I wasn't taught that in school. I don't know if you were in Singapore, but I wasn't.
No, not at all. We weren't taught anything of that. We obviously in Singapore, back in my day, in the 70s, 80s, and a bit of the 90s, you definitely did feel, very much like the lavender scare. I don't think there was an orchestrated sort of campaign to kind of get rid of people from their jobs in Singapore as such. But you definitely felt a very explicit kind of exclusion in whether at work or school or in social circles. That's one of the things about Fellow Travelers. It is 8 hours of trauma,
Yes.
And we had one of the themes of our Tuesday discussions is like, how much trauma can we take? Because our stories are so much informed by trauma,
but it's
and
true,
sometimes it is true. And it is important, but I just don't know. I don't know if there are people who are so hungry for this amount of information that you can kind of consume 8 hours quite comfortably. I was trying to kind of explain why my mind kept running away. I think some of it is just too dark, and it feels repetitive as well. Some of it is old information, some of it is new information, but you kind of feel like, I've processed this before. I have been through kind of understanding it's kind of analysis with all this stuff, and it's kind of a challenge that I don't have to put myself through. Maybe that's what it is. But one thing I do think is that young people need to have stories like these. Those I would imagine those in the 20s and 30s. I would hate for them to grow up as queer people and not knowing very much about how we have become the people we are, and the freedom that is so that we fought so hard for, that that they get to enjoy now. What's that saying, that there are people who plant seeds for trees that they never get to sit in the shade of. I think that is a very moving saying.
But also, I feel like sorry, continue.
Yeah, please go ahead. So this kind of story is important, at least for those purposes.
I also feel like it's a bit of a, I suppose we're crying to be heard, aren't we? And it is hard to see the trauma and the history that we've been through, but we're still dismissed. If you look at it like under President Eisenhower, where gays and lesbians were considered vulnerable to blackmail and considered to have weak moral characters, and we were equated with communists, and thousands of government employees, for example, were rooted out and lost their jobs as a result. I mean, there was so much effort into witch hunting gays and lesbians. And I'm saying gays and lesbians because that's what they were targeting at the time. And you think about it, Suzy, I feel like, I don't know, I know it keeps coming up and we keep dealing with our trauma, but, you know, we were persecuted in Nazi Germany, right? And then we had the Lavender Scare of the Cold War era going on as well. We've had HIV hit us as a community. We've had marriage equality and all the toxic debate that went on with that. We've got the drag time story stuff going on now. We've got the anti-trans stuff going on now. It's relentless. It hasn't stopped.
Yeah.
It has not stopped. Despite things improving, it hasn't stopped as a community. And I feel like this series is a bit of a, hey, you need to see it. For goodness sake, someone needs to hear that this is what we have been through. And I feel like...
Yeah, one of the questions I was interested in the series was, who do they think the audience is? Because it doesn't feel like it's created for a niche audience. It feels very high budget, and it's on Paramount Plus that, you know, that is one of the main streaming platforms. And because of the amount of resources that go into it, I feel like they intend for it to be seen by more than just queer audiences. And in that way, I guess, you know, that's very important if other people get to see what has been done to us. I really doubt, though, like if as queer people we struggle to go through 8 episodes, I don't know if you're not part of the community how you're going to receive it.
Exactly.
It is not an easy watch. There is a lot to get from it. It's a very rewarding watch. I have to emphasize that it's a rewarding watch, but it's not an easy watch.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like until we're good at telling our history and our stories, and the whole community, everyone understands it, this, I suppose, these attacks, this discrimination, this persecution will continue. It'll keep rearing its ugly head. You know, the religious people will get out against us. It will happen until someone goes, oh my God, these guys have been through so much, let's leave them alone.
Yeah, religious and political structures, you know, that we are so used to are all based on dividing and conquering. And, you know, queer people are a big part of them. And they will never, the whole system is based on dividing and conquering. It's almost like they don't know how to exist without dividing and conquering. So we are an easy target, you know, for me, you know, as a person who's trans, who's had queer history, and as a person of color and all that, I understand that, actually, sometimes you feel like it's not necessarily a thing that's personal. It's simply the system that exists based on pulling people apart, so that certain people can have power. You know, the way people go around kind of rallying for political power because they're running for this office or whatever, based on, you know, saying that children trans children shouldn't be able to compete in certain sports, or in America saying that women shouldn't have the right over their bodies when it comes to abortion rights. So it almost feels like it's not a personal thing. It's simply an instrument for them to grab power with, but the fallout being a lot of people get affected in really harmful ways.
Exactly. But one thing it does show is we are resilient. Like, we really are resilient, which in effect means we're not easy targets because we bounce back. And the sooner they realise that, the better, and hopefully it will start to stop. But look, I agree. I think it's good that the history is told. I don't know if this is the right vehicle to tell it, but it's a good attempt to, and hopefully people will watch it.
Yeah, I'm very kind of encouraged that the amount of resources, it just looks so expensive. And I feel like, people have some confidence in this sort of content, and that's a good thing. And today it was announced that Fellow Travelers was nominated for 2 Golden Globes. So, that's a plus for content for film and TV that's made for the LGBTQIA plus community. We should celebrate that.
And the other thing I just want to make, it's really important that we all stick together because we're a lot stronger that way. And I just think sometimes we forget about that, which I've made that point.
Yeah.
Let's stick together.
Yeah,
Isn't that a song?
Oh, that is a song. It's a very sexy song.
Yeah.
What's his name? Brian Ferry. Hey, good. I'm good with pop culture. The character Hawk. The character Hawk, is often trying to run away from the community, and he's trying to kind of do things by himself, stay in the closet himself, and he's trying to move away from his community, move away from his lover, and it never works because it's not possible, it's not natural, and over 30-something years, he keeps coming back to Tim and then to the community. So that's a good thing that I saw in Fellow Travelers.
Definitely. Suzy, we are talking about Fellow Travelers. What are we watching next week? I think is the last week.
We're staying on Paramount Plus for a scary movie called They Them, starring Kevin Bacon as a man who runs a conversion therapy gay camp. No prizes for guessing who's a real nut job who needs psychological help. I'll see you next Tuesday. Love you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Suzy.